Good evening, I'm Soraya Mia and this is AWANI Tonight. Floods in Baling, Kedah raise eyebrows on state government. MB rebukes claims. And Bank Negara announces another rate hike with more expected to come. That's coming up. The Kedah state government must conduct a public commission of inquiry on the devastating floods in Baling, Kedah. Environmental group Sahabat Alam Malaysia says such an inquiry is needed to ascertain what exactly happened, as well as to identify measures and gaps needed to be addressed with urgency. The group also urged for an inquiry into fatal floods and landslides around Gunung Jerai in 2021 that killed 6 people. It warned that as the frequency of intense rainfalls due to climate change will be a recurring problem, it is important to take action now to avert another tragedy. The floods in Baling, triggered by a surge of headwaters following heavy downpour, claimed 3 lives. Hundreds of residents were evacuated to relief centres with more than 80 houses damaged. Kedah Menteri Besar Datuk Seri Muhammad Sanusi Madnor denies any personal interests in the Musang Keng Durian Farm project in Gunung Inas, which is being claimed to be the cause of the massive floods 2 days ago. He said the project was originally approved by the previous government.
Buat apa saya cover Musang Keng? Saya tak nak ketinggalan apa. Musang Keng itu ditanam zaman sebelum saya. Saya masuk pokok tu adalah. Saya nak fakta, fact and figure saja. To be fair to everybody. Saya tak boleh nak defend siapa-siapa kan. No? Kita hanya selamat bila kita pegang fakta dan figure. Duduklah tang tu. Persepsi apa cubaan-cubaan ni biar pilih jalanlah. Saya ada fakta dan figure, saya pegang situ.
He said the order to stop cultivation was issued in July 2020, 2 months after he became the Menteri Besar, which also involved instructions for vegetation replanting to cover the ground. Sanusi was responding to claims that the state government had failed to act with regards to the durian farming activity in Gunung Inas, which was claimed to have caused the Baling flash floods.
The ability of Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob to press through with institutional reforms in Parliament will be tested in the upcoming sitting this month. Lembah Pantai MP Fahmi Fazil says while reform proposals like those limiting the Prime Minister's tenure to 10 years have made it into the landmark MOU between the government and the opposition leaders, it remains to be seen if it will be given priority for debate.
Why should we limit? If prime ministers don't last that long, right now, as I said, we've had three prime ministers in as many years. So what is there to say that every 5 years we won't have a new prime minister or less than that? It's an important balance to make between having some kind of stability in the system, as well as making sure that people don't overstay their welcome. And more important than that, to make sure that there is no, erosion of whether it's the separation of powers between the legislative, judiciary and the executive, executive overreach particularly. But it is important to see this reform in the context of an array of reforms, a basket of reforms. And the whole host of reforms which I think we will be talking about in these next 2 days. So you can't view this reform in and of itself alone, isolated in a vacuum from all of the reforms that we intend to do. There's no point in just passing one if all of the others kita tak buat.
At the same time, Bangi MP Ong Kian Ming says there's room for more meaningful reforms if the MOU is extended. He says it would give both sides more time to implement reforms if the 15th general election can be pushed to July next year.
DAP Secretary General Anthony Loke earlier said that PH is open to the idea of extending the MOU with the ruling coalition. He predicted yesterday that GE15 will be held next year. UMNO President Datuk Seri Ahmad Zaid Hamidi, however, had previously dismissed the proposal for an extension, adding that the MOU should not extend beyond July this year. Tan Sri Anwar Musa, as a member of the MOU Negotiation and Implementation Committee, said last month that the agreement has no expiry date and that both sides have agreed that G15 cannot be held before July 31st.
In other news, Bank Negara Malaysia lifted its benchmark interest rate for the second straight meeting as it looked to tame rising inflation. The central bank raised the overnight policy rate, or OPR, by 25 basis points to 2.25%.
The ceiling and floor rates of the OPR's corridor are correspondingly increased to 2.5% and 2% respectively. The central bank said it had decided on a further adjustment after considering positive growth prospects for the Malaysian economy in recent months, following the transition to the endemic phase. This includes firmer domestic demand and a recovery in tourism and investment activity. In May, the central bank raised the OPR from a historic low of 1.75% to 2%. The last time BNM implemented back-to-back OPR rate hikes was in mid-2010.
More rate hikes are certainly coming, says UOB economist Julia Goh, who expects at least one more hike in September, which will help to shore up the ringgit against the US dollar.
So the dollar is strengthening against most major currencies and Asian currencies, right? It's king dollar at this point. And why is that? Because US consumer prices have risen to the highest in over 4 decades. I mean, our inflation is closer to 3%, but their inflation is over 8%, right? And as I said, the US Federal Reserve is set to front load more rate hikes in the second half of this year, really just to get their inflation levels under control. Right, so the pace of US rate hikes is far ahead many other countries, right? Even for Malaysia. For us, we hike 25, but for them, they hike 50, 75 basis points, right? So the yield or the rate that you get for holding a US dollar is expected to rise faster than if you hold any other currencies or even the ringgit. And that's really the reason why the ringgit, along with all the other currencies, are weakening vis-a-vis the dollar.
We'll go for a quick break. Stay with us.
COVID-19 memperlihatkan kepada kita betapa pantasnya adaptasi teknologi di kalangan PKS kita. Niaga AWANI dan Unified Business akan menyelami perjalanan kebangkitan semula PKS kita melalui segmen Jiwa SME setiap Selasa dan Khamis untuk inspirasi anda.
Transformasikan perniagaan dengan Unified Business, rakan digital pilihan anda. Hubungi kami sekarang dan jimat sehingga 50%. Jom Unified Business.
Welcome back. India on Friday became the latest country to impose a ban on most single-use plastics as a part of a growing global effort to tackle a leading source of pollution. Malaysia has similar ambitions to do away with single-use plastics completely by 2030. Just how ready are we to start enforcing a ban on plastics? Greenpeace Malaysia's Hema Mahadevan shares her 2 cents.
Awareness has to come in. As long as corporations, companies or plastic manufacturers are not aware of the plastic waste issue, it will be hard to sort of come up with any sort of implementation or at least any other solution. Furthermore, when you're banning single-use plastics in the beginning is only the beginning of a proper waste management policy and practices. We also need a reduction strategy to set out goals and look into the problem of our waste management system. The government needs to consult NGOs and experts on where we are heading in terms of waste management. We should not need to take up more landscape to be turned into dump site and landfills.
In a 2021 study on plastic waste, it found that just 20 companies are the source of more than half of single-use plastic items thrown away globally. And they are largely made up of petrochemical companies.
We need to firstly understand how plastics are made. It's very much, if you look at where plastics come from, it has to do a lot with the fossil fuel companies. Oil and gas is really not a big thing at the moment, and we're not as reliant as we were back in the day. We have so many other solutions now. So a lot of these fossil fuel companies are really looking into plastic manufacturing, and 48% of, for example, plastic packaging sort of comes from the plastic manufacturers. So what we need is to, I think people need to know the background of this. And, at Greenpeace, we do a lot of awareness talks, or, we use our social media to sort of put this messaging out there, but it's not enough. I think the government has a very big role in this as well, to sort of put this sort of messaging out. Like, for example, why are we banning plastic straws? Why do we want to encourage people to stop using plastic bags? These are some of the questions that need to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed very, very quickly.
On to global news. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he plans to stay in power despite the resignations of 2 top cabinet ministers and a slew of more junior officials. Johnson faces fierce questioning from MPs as more ministers say they no longer have faith in his leadership, with Housing Minister Stuart Andrew the latest to resign. He joins Finance Minister Rishi Sunak and Health Minister Sajid Javid, who resigned within minutes of each other on Tuesday evening. Both said they no longer could stay in government after the latest series of scandals linked to his administration. Johnson has been hit by allegations that he failed to come clean about a lawmaker who was appointed to a senior position despite claims of sexual misconduct. Johnson quickly replaced the 2 men, but a string of junior ministers have also quit, and Johnson's support inside his Conservative Party is shrinking rapidly. Meanwhile, a man accused of opening fire on a 4th of July parade near Chicago has been charged with 7 counts of murder. 21-year-old Robert Cremo is accused of firing 70 bullets from a high-powered rifle down onto the crowd in Highland Park. The attack left 7 dead and more than 30 others injured.
Today, the Lake County State's Attorney's Office has charged Robert Cremo III with 7 counts of first-degree murder for the killing spree that he has unleashed against our community. These are just the first of many charges that will be filed against Mr. Cremo. I want to emphasize that. There will be more charges.
Cremo reportedly disguised himself as a woman so he could escape alongside fleeing victims. He was caught by police after an 8-hour manhunt on Monday. Police said Cremo had 2 prior contacts with law enforcement, but was still able to purchase 5 guns in the past year. If convicted, Cremo will face life in prison without the possibility of parole. China's zero COVID strategy is being tested again after a jump in infections in 2 major cities, Shanghai and Xi'an, prompted authorities to put tens of millions back under lockdown. Health authorities reported over 300 infections today. The fresh cases have deepened fears that China may be set to return to the kinds of strict restrictions seen earlier this year. In Shanghai, officials launched a new round of mass testing in over half of the city's districts after a rebound in cases since the weekend. All karaoke bars were closed after some infections were linked to 6 such venues. Meanwhile, in Xi'an, the city was placed back under temporary control measures after 29 infections were found. Officials have blamed the recent outbreak on the BA.5.2 sublineage of the Omicron variant, which is more transmissible and immune evasive. Will newly sworn-in President of the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., maintain the Duterte playbook in suppressing dissenting voices? Tonight on Consider This, we speak to our guests about the return of the Marcos dynasty to the Malacanang. That's all we have for you on AWANI tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Soraya Mia, and we'll see you again.